geared towards people who are just generally curious about honeybees. And I do a wide range of ages, from children up to people older than me. So I think I cover a good amount of material that most of us will appreciate. You can ask questions as we go along, but a lot of times people get ahead of me because they have certain questions they want to ask. So I would almost ask you to wait, because more than likely I will answer your question as I go along. But certainly at the end, if I didn't answer your question, go ahead and ask, and I'll be glad to answer any of your questions. So here's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'll tell you how I got interested in beekeeping, and then we'll show you how you go about getting your bees to actually start a hive. I'll put a hive here together tonight to show you what a typical hive looks like. Then we'll talk about the bees. How are they organized inside the hive? And in addition to talking about the bees that are inside the hive, I'm going to tell you about all the work that they do. They do so much work both in and outside the hive, and I'll go over a lot of those chores. And I'll also talk about collecting honey. Yesterday I collected the first honey out of my 2 hives, and I'll show you how we actually do that. And because, in addition to just learning about bees, most people don't realize how important they are. I was a beekeeper for several years before I learned how big of a role they play in our ecosystem every day. So I'd like to highlight that as well. And then we'll wrap things up with any last-minute questions you might have. So this is a picture of my 2 hives that are current right now. But just to say where I came from and where I get into beekeeping, I was reading the Worcester Magazine newspaper one day, and there was a little blurb at the bottom of one of the pages, and it said, "Come learn about beekeeping." At Clem's Home Improvement Store, Route 9 in Spencer. I know it's a little bit away from here, but it's like Home Depot and Lowe's. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. So my wife and I drove out to Clem's. Never thought about beekeeping at all, but I just thought it sounded interesting. So we showed up there, and we were a couple minutes late, and we came in there, big, tall shelves, wide aisles, and there was 50 folding chairs set up, and they were all full, and there were people standing around the side. And I said, gee, I didn't realize there were this many people interested in beekeeping. 50 people. Keep that number in mind. That man who spoke about beekeeping, similar to what I'm going to do tonight, he's from Kingsborough, and he's a commercial beekeeper. He's got about 500 hives. He has a big store. He sells everything related to beekeeping. He has his own bee school, 8 weeks long, 2 hours a night. And so he compressed all of that into 2 hours at Clem's. And at the end of 2 hours, I said to my wife, we need to get bees. They are such fascinating little creatures, and I learned more and more after that. He hooked me. I moved from where I lived when I went to Clem's. I had 2 beehives there, and now I have a different location. I have my 2 beehives here. You'll see there's 2 different sizes there. There's the one on the right is an older hive, and the one on the left is a newer hive. I have a little sign on the side. You can't see the one on the other side here, but it says, hey, these are my honeybees. Leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. But here's my name and number of cases in your property, because they're not on my property. So, now I want to point out 2 things. We got a whole bunch of dead leaves around the hive, and you can barely see a couple of concrete blocks down. The 2 hives are sitting on a plastic pallet. Honeybees don't live in the ground like yellow jackets or bumblebees. You have to have them off the ground. So that's why they're off the ground on concrete in a pallet. So what do you need to become a beekeeper? We'll see a few different items here in the next few slides, but I'm going to point them out individually. I pointed out those dead leaves around the hive. This is my smoker. They have a couple of different styles, but this bag here is smoker fuel. I don't buy smoker fuel. I go to those dead leaves. This is just a set of bellows. You open it up, you put dead leaves and dead pine needles and maybe some cardboard paper in there to get it started, and then you light it. Once you get a good embers going, and you got smoke out of there, you're ready to use your smoker. And I'll talk about the smoker in a second there. The 2 important tools of this tool here is called a hive tool and a brush. Here's my hive tool. styles, but no matter which style you use, oh, I'm not going to go that. Yeah. This one has a hook that's shaped like that, like you see there in the picture. The other one, they have a hook, but instead of bending over like that, it comes off to the side, like the letter J. But either one you can use, they work perfectly fine. And the gloves and a style of a veil to put over your head. And I'll talk about all the pieces of the hives individually. The only other piece of equipment that I use is this device here. It's called a frame hanger. And I'll put it on a box once I get a box of it. But it just hangs from the side of the frame. And it's got two arms that come out. And the reason why I use this is because, and I used it yesterday, if you're taking frames out to do something, instead of standing them on the ground where the bees are going to fall off, or they're going to get dirty, or other insects are going to crawl on there, you can hang them from the side of your hive while you do your work. It's a lot cleaner and neater. You don't need it, but it sure comes in handy. Those are the only real tools you need to work in a hive. They sell a whole bunch of other things, but they're nice to have things, not necessary. So what do you need for clothing? This person here has got a bee veil that's different style than the one I just showed you a little while ago. The one I showed you a while ago, you just put over your head, strap it underneath your shoulders. This one here is attached to a full-length jumpsuit. I don't have a full-length jumpsuit. I have a jacket style. Just like a regular jacket you might put on, but it zips up the front and it's got a veil attached to it. This is what I use it. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't use it. Sometimes the bees are happy and I don't need to worry about getting stung, and sometimes I don't know, so I put this on. And it gets a little tricky, but the personality of the hive is based on the personality of the queen. And if she's a mellow queen, the bees are mellow. If she's an aggressive queen, the bees are going to be aggressive. But then there's certain things that are going on time to time throughout the year where they may be angry or they may. So you always err on the side of caution. You should wear an outfit on when you go take care of your hives. Gloves. And I'll pause here because it wasn't on the last slide. The only other thing you really should have, and it's not a piece of equipment, but it's an EpiPen set. You should always have an EpiPen set, at your hives when you're doing work. I'm not allergic to these things. Tomorrow I may be, and I don't know if I'll have an allergic reaction. If it's mild, okay. If it's serious, you want an EpiPen. Same thing with you and anybody else. You can give it to somebody else, or you can give it to yourself. So if you tell your doctor that you're a beekeeper, he or she should willingly write you a prescription for an EpiPen. And I joke and I say, if your doctor won't do that, well, you find a new doctor. Because they should understand that if you get stung and you have a reaction, you need to take care of things. Good socks and shoes, very important. And I can tell you about how many times I've been stung. I've been a beekeeper for 16 years. I think I've been stung about 4 or 5 times in that 16 years, like once here, once there. And it's happened when I haven't been wearing any gear. Because I know my bees and I know they were mellow. So I would work in the hive. But then I would forget what I'm doing. And you feel this tickle on your neck, and you think it's a mosquito, and you go like this, and you kind of like smush the bee. What's she going to do? She's going to sting you. It's just, she's not mad at me, she's just protecting herself. And so in 16 years, 4 or 5 times, I think that's a pretty good record. But I have been stung really seriously one time because of not wearing good socks and shoes. I went to go to work one morning, 6:30 in the morning, it was still dark out there. I looked at my hives and one of them had toppled over. And I said, oh, I can't go to work like this and leave my hive there. Who knows what's going to happen? So I was semi-smart. I put my work stuff down. I got my jacket and gloves and I put them on and I tucked my pants into my work socks. That was the key word, work socks. They're not sports socks. They're not cushion socks. They were very thin nylon socks. So I'm in the dark at 6:30 in the morning, starting to move stuff around. The bees are mad. They're agitated. What do you expect? Their house is knocked over. I started getting stung in this ankle and this ankle several times. And I didn't know how many times it was, but it was starting to hurt, so I stopped. Long story short, I went into the house, put on some blue jeans, got on some boots, tucked them in, went back out there and finished my work. I got stung 13 times in this ankle and 37 times in that ankle. So that was a long time ago, but I was acting like an old man. When I didn't go to work for 3 days. You know, I had to walk like this because it was so painful. So lesson learned, no matter what you do, just in case the bees get mad, wear good socks and shoes. So how do we get our bees to become a beekeeper if we're thinking about becoming a beekeeper? 4 main ways, and I'll just put them up there quickly and I'll explain each one. We can start with what we call a package. We can start with what we call a nuke. And nuke is just a short, like an abbreviation for nucleus. If you know where there's some wild bees out there, or a swarm, and I'll explain what a swarm is, you can collect those bees, or you can start with an established hive, and I'll explain that one first. An established hive is what I was faced with. I had a house in Auburn, big house, kids were growing up and out of the house, don't need the big house anymore, decided to move to a condo. I knew I couldn't keep my bees on condo property, so I sold my bees to a person that was going to become a beekeeper. So instead of starting from 0, that person started with 2 established hives, my hives. Easy way to start things. This is what we call a package of bees. What you do around here, there are several bee suppliers in the area, but if there aren't any local to you, and it really doesn't make any difference if they supply them right there or if they have to go someplace and get them for you. But what you do is you order them through a supplier in the late winter, very, very early spring, and when it's ready to make those deliveries, that person will rent an empty truck, drive down to someplace like Georgia, and fill all the orders that look like this and bring them back to Massachusetts, and you pick them up and you start your bee hive by buying a package. So this is a package. It's 3 pounds of bees, 10,000 bees. And that's just a starter, 10,000. All right? So you don't see a cover on it, but it's just a piece of plywood that's on there. And you can see the can. But what that can is got sugar water in it. You got all these bees in here coming from Georgia, and they're going to be hungry. So they fill a can with sugar water, and they poke some holes in it. So when it sits in there, the bees can drink that sugar water on their trip to Massachusetts. What you can't see there is if you order a queen, she comes in her own little cage, and that's on purpose. Because the way they raise bees and put them in a package is they get a scale, and they put this empty box on the scale, and they get this big funnel, and they come over here and they get some hives, and they take some frames out of the hives, and they shape the bees into the funnel, and they take another frame and shape the bees into it. And when that scale says 3 pounds, they put a lid on it. And then they go over there where they raise queens, and they take a queen and they put her in this little cage, and they put a couple of female attendants in there with her to keep her company and clean her and feed her on her trip to Massachusetts. And the reason why they keep her separately is because if they just took this queen and put her in this cage, those bees would kill her because she is not their queen. They only want their queen. So they keep her separate. So she's hanging in there for the trip. And on this cage, there's a sugar cube at the bottom, and it's covered with a cork. So when it comes time for me to put the bees into the hive, and you'll see a picture of that, and the queen into the hive, once I put the bees into the hive, I take this and I hang this inside the hive. Now the bees can go by this little screen and see that queen and smell her and touch her and taste her. I'll take that cork out of the bottom and expose that sugar cube. And it takes about 3 days for the bees to chew through that sugar cube, and the queen will emerge. And because they've seen her for 3 days and smelled her and touched her, they'll adopt her and make her their queen. So I'll pass out so you can see what a queen cage looks like. So that's a nuke. Most people usually start with a nuke. The next way that you can start collecting, starting your hive with bees is, that's a package. This is a nuke. They come in plastic, they come in cardboard, they come in wood. This is a nuke box. And if you see there, you can see 4 frames with a lot of bees, and they just took a 5th frame out so you can just take a look inside there. But when I put bees into a brand new hive and they haven't done any work, they have to start from scratch to build everything inside that hive. But with a nuke, if you look there, you can see some honeycomb already built. They've already built. And so what I do is if I have an empty hive, I'll take these 5 frames, put them in that box, and then surround it with some more frames, and the bees have got half their work done already. You get more bees and some work already done. So you get a jump start on your hive versus just putting in a package where they have to start everything from scratch. Wild bees. This is a tree in my house. You just lay some in it. If you can collect wild bees, you can start your hive without buying a package or a nuke. You can get freebies. Freebies. I personally wouldn't take them out of this tree because I don't know how deep these bees are built in a home, or how far up or down, or how far left or right. If it was a different tree and I could judge it, but what people will do is they'll go up there with a chainsaw and they'll cut that portion of the tree out of there that they think contains the whole hive, and then they'll go through another process of getting the bees out of the tree and putting them into the hive. Tricky, but it can be done. Swarms. There's a situation in the hive that might cause some of the bees to leave the hive. It's called swarming. One of the big reasons is if the hive is too crowded, there's not enough room for all the bees in the hive. They do everything for the good of the hive. So if the bees talk among themselves and say, hey, there's not enough room for all of us in here, what they will do is they will make us a queen. They already have one queen that we put in there, but they'll make another queen. And when she hatches, half the bees will leave with the old queen, and the rest of the bees will stay behind with the new queen. Now it's not as crowded anymore because half the bees left. Well, what they do is when they come out of the hive, they fly around the hive and they look for a spot to land and hang out and rest for a little while. They can rest on the side of a car, side of a wall. But most of the time, if you get some trees or something, maybe they'll go find a tree pretty close to the hive and hang out there. So in that nest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no matter what kind of swarm location you have, there's a queen in there. And so they're around her, protecting her, waiting. And what those bees will do is they'll send out scouts in all different directions to find a new home for those bees that left the hive. And they'll come back, and they use the term democracy. They'll talk among themselves and vote on where's the best spot is. I don't know how they do it, but this bee will say, oh, I found it in a tree. This bee here says, oh, I found it in the eaves of my neighbor's house. And they'll say, okay, let's go to this place. They'll come off the tree, they'll fly around, and they'll follow the scouts to the new home. So before they find a new home, if you can go to one of these locations and collect those bees, you can start a hive with, again, 3 bees. And those are just generic pictures, but if you've watched the news the last 3 or 4 months, you might have seen twice where there was some swarming going on. Once was in a tennis match in California. That's about 3 months ago. The swarm landed on the camera that goes back and forth and across the field that you see in the sports team. And so they got somebody come out there and they took the bees off the camera and continued the tennis match. The last one was about 3 weeks ago. It was a baseball game in Arizona. Just before the game started, the bees were on the netting behind home plate. And so they got a local beekeeper out there, he got a stop on, he went out there, got a lift, and went out there and captured those bees. They make a special vacuum cleaner. It's not as powerful as like shop vac, because that would be too rough on them. But it's smaller, it's gentler, and there's padding inside, so when you suck up all those bees, they're contained in the vacuum cleaner. He came down, they gave him a standing ovation, and they let him throw out the first pitch in the ball game. So he was the hero for the day. And so you can start your bees if you can collect a swarm. So there I am putting my package of bees into what was my second hive at my old house. Here's my first sugar water, my brush, some different parts of the hive, an empty frame over here. This is the rough method. There's two methods. The rough method is, once you get everything ready, you get your queen put aside, you tip that box upside down and you just shake it and get all the bees out of it. They don't like it a whole bunch. They fly around, but they eventually settle down. The other method is you put an empty box on top, and then you just lay that box of bees inside the empty box and let the bees come out on their own. I didn't know that at this time yet, but if I ever install a package of bees now, I know to use the gentler method. So I'm going to put a hive here together tonight, all the individual pieces. And what we see here, this is the way my older hive looked like on that picture of my two hives. And it's just a typical looking hive. Different beekeepers will construct their hive differently. There's no wrongs for putting a hive together. This is just a bunch of different variations. So the first thing we have is the stand. Now the stand is just to keep it off of whatever you put your hive on. Mine was on a pallet. On top of your stand, is your bottom board. Now the bottom board is their ground floor. And what you see there in addition is a device called the entrance reducer. So when we put this hive together, even though 10,000 bees sounds like a lot of bees, that would be considered a weak hive. And because it's a weak hive, until they have more and more bees and stronger every hive, they have to defend this whole open area to prevent any of the yellow jackets or wasps or hornets coming in and stealing their honey. And to help them do that, we have this device called an entrance reducer. If you look at the entrance reducer, it's got two notches in it, a little one and a wider one. A little one, and you just turn the stick and it's a wider opening. So when I have a brand new hive, because I want to help protect their hive, I'll put this entrance reducer so the little opening is showing. That way there, instead of having to defend the whole opening, they only have to defend that little, you can come out of it. And there's not a whole bunch of bees, so they don't need a whole bunch of room to go in and out. But after a couple months, there's going to be a lot more bees in there, so to give them more room, I just flip that stick, and now the wider opening is showing, and now there's more room for them to go in and out. Now they can defend the wider opening a little bit better. And once the hive is well established, I'll take this entrance reducer completely out, because now there's enough bees in there to defend the hive, and they need a lot more room because there's a lot more bees, so they need more room to go in and out. And it also, because there's a lot more bees, there's a lot more heat in the hive, they'll need some ventilation, and by taking this out, that allows more air to get into the hive as well. So the entrance reducer. So the first box we're going to put on there is called the deep box or the deep super. I don't call them supers, even though that's the proper term, but I call them the deep box. This is where they're going to start building their hive as soon as you put your bees in there. Every box, no matter what size it is, they make 3 different size boxes, has 10 frames. You might see some people out there with 8 frames, but that's not normal. But it's still, every box is just 3 different size boxes, but 8 frames instead of 10 frames. Most beekeepers use a 10 frame box. If we start with 10 frames that look like this, and I like to use black myself in the deep boxes for the bees to build their brood area on purpose, and I'll show you why in several slides. But this is a wooden frame. They have several different styles, but this is the style I use. It's got a plastic sheet that snaps in place, and it's coated with wax, and it's stamped in a honeycomb pattern. And that, when the bees are in there, they smell and taste this wax, and they sense that honeycomb pattern, so they build their home based on that frame, and so they will take that frame, and I'll pass this one around too, and they'll build honeycomb look at that, there's two different colors on the honeycomb, a darker color and a lighter color. That darker color tells me, as an experienced beekeeper, is where the queen laid her eggs. So she'll usually lay her eggs at the bottom of the frame in like a football-shaped pattern, and then the bees will store honey and nectar around the edges, and that's the lighter color. And so every frame is a mini nursery. Young bees and food on every frame. And there's 10 of them in there. In addition to them building their brood pattern and putting the pollen and the honey around the edges so they don't have hard going to get food to feed the young bees, they'll also store some honey on the outside edges, the last couple frames on the outside. Storing it, getting ready for the winter time. As a beekeeper, when I go out there and I see my frames like that, about 70 to 8% built up like that, that's when I'll put a second box on there. And you see 2 boxes here. This is the way I do it. The bees will go up, they'll build honeycomb on those blank frames to look just like the one that's built up 10 more times. They just naturally go up. Then, when I see that, so you're going to pretend I have a second box up here. When I see that second box about 70 to 80% filled, that's when I'll put the honey super on there where I want to collect my honey. Yeah, you just lay it on the table. But before I do that, on top of my second box, I put this screen. It's called a queen excluder. They make them in plastic, they make them in metal, but I put it on top of my top big box. Now, the reason why I do that, if I want to collect honey, if the bees go up into this honey super boxes, if the queen goes up there, she's going to lay eggs up there. And I don't want eggs in the frames where I'm going to extract honey. All I want in those frames up there is honey. So on my top box, I put this device called a queen excluder, and there's a pattern there that is small enough to let the worker bees go up and build honeycomb and store honey, but it's too small to let the queen go through. So she's trapped down in those 2 big boxes, so the only work that gets done up in the top box is honey. It makes it easy for us to collect honey. So the queen excluder. So on top of my second big box, and I put my honey super box on there. And really, the only reason why there's 2 different size boxes, there are actually 3, but it's the same reason for the 2 other size boxes besides the big box, is weight. This big box, if it's full with bees and young bees and pollen and honey and stuff, it's going to weigh close to 100 pounds. And so, I'm older, and there's people older than me that who are beekeepers. If I have to lift a 100-pound box and move it somewhere, I can use my legs and grab that and pick it up and move it to where I want it, because you use your legs like they teach you. Even if I had a second big box on there, I'm about this height, I can lift it up enough to take it off and put it off to the side. But once I'm about here with 100 pounds, I can't manage that. That's why they make smaller boxes. It's easier to handle a smaller box at this height than a big box at this height. So this big box, this is actually the medium box, will weigh close to 50 pounds when it's completely full with honey. I'll put 10 frames in there. Again, just like the other one, only white. It doesn't make a difference if it's polka dotted. Pink doesn't make a difference to the bees. Plastic sheet covered with wax, stamped in a honeycomb pattern. They'll take this 10 times and build on that just like the big frames. And they'll put honeycomb on both sides of the small frames. That's how I do my beehive. 2 big boxes and 1 small box. When it comes time for me to collect honey, and I did it yesterday, if I go out there and find a frame that's completely capped with honey, and I'll show you that for a while, I'll take that out of there, move some frames around and put an empty frame in there, and I'll let them build on that, and I'll go back and I'll check on them regularly. I'll keep taking out, replace it, take it out, replace it. I was a little bit late yesterday. I went to my yard yesterday, and all 10 frames were completely capped with honey. So I did a little bit more work than I expected to do yesterday, but I got 10 frames of honey yesterday. So I took it all out at once. I don't usually take and a wooden outer cover that's covered with metal. And that's on purpose. So my inner cover has to have some sort of hole in it. It could be round, square, rectangle, doesn't make any difference. And it have a notch cut at one end. I actually cut a second notch because I was trying something a while back. But at least one notch. And this goes on top of your whatever box you have. Now, the reason why there's two covers is with that hole is sometimes you have to feed the bees. If you have to feed them in warm weather, you take a can of sugar water or a mayonnaise jar that you put sugar water in and punch holes in the lid, just like when the bees transported. You get a couple of sticks that are about the size of a pencil, and you rest this on top of those pencils, and there's enough room for the bees to go in there and drink sugar water. And then you get an empty box and put it around, then you put a cover on top of the empty box. If you have to feed the bees in the wintertime, this is going to freeze. So you make a sugar patty, just like a mud pie. You put that up there, and then they can crawl through that hole and eat the sugar patty. And the reason why, in addition to having two covers, is the bees, and I'll talk about it, they make a substance out of their mouth from different plants with different materials called propolis. Propolis, it's like caulking material. They love to seal any place where two pieces of wood join. Every nook and cranny of the hive, they will seal with propolis. And I understand it. There's a reason for sealing the hive. You can see I'm rough here putting my hive together, but they're going to seal these joints where this box hits the entrance reducer. They'll seal all along there. Where the box sits on the bottom board, they'll seal all. But that's smart. Stops any rain from coming in there, stops any wind from coming in there, any little bugs that can squeeze through a gap. But they also seal everything inside the hive, and I'll show you a couple of pictures. But this brownish orange stuff on the inner cover, when this was in place, they sealed this cover to the box. And so that's where your hive tube might come in handy. When they seal it, I mean, it's tough sometimes. You go in there, you just break the seal, and then you go in there and do your work. But if we only had the outer cover to protect it against the elements on there, they're going to seal that to the hive. And you can see how much room you have to get in there and try to do any work to break that seal. Very, very tricky. This is not my outer cover. This is the one that a friend gave to me. You can see all the propolis that they used at one time or other. All this, where this was sitting on the box. And then the edge, all around the edge, they sealed many, many times. They didn't do this just once. He used this many times. He was not the smartest move to do to use this as your only cover. And then you have a rock that you put on. You saw my two hives, a brick or rock on, because even though this looks solid, it's very relatively light. So a good wind could come underneath there and pick that up. So you put a big rock on there to keep it straight. Now I didn't explain about the smoker, but when I go into my hive, once I get this smoking, when I approach my hive, I take the brick off. I'll put a couple of puffs of smoke where that notch was, so a little bit of smoke will go into the hive. Sometimes you can just break the seal with your hand, and you'll put that aside while you do your work. And they're going to seal this too, so you get your hive tool, and you break the seal, and then you put a few puffs of smoke across the top. Well, and the reason why you do that is when you take this cover off, there's going to be 10 frames there, and there's going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of bees in your way, on top of the frames. They're in your way. You've got work to do. Well, when you blow the smoke across the frames, they smell that and they think there's a fire. So they, fire. So a whole bunch of them will go down and start collecting some honey, holding on to it and storing it in case that, just like wild animals, fire gets closer and closer, they take off. Same thing with the bees. If that fire gets too close to the hive, they're going to take off to protect themselves. So now they're out of, not all of them, but most of them are going to be out of your way so you can start doing work in your hive. Once you're done doing your work, you put your covers back on there and close everything up. The bees say, don't smell anything, false alarm, they'll go back up on top and do what they were doing. So that's the main reason for using the smoker. All right, so that's a typical hive. Mine, 2 big boxes and 1 little box. There are other beekeepers. When I went to my hive yesterday, my honey super was filled with honey. What some beekeepers will do, we'll put a second honey super box on there and let the bees fill that one with honey. They'll put a third one on there, and they'll just collect their honey all at the end of the year. But I like to take my honey as I can get it, and I'll explain why after a little while. If you're thinking about becoming a beekeeper, this was just last month, how much it costs for, on average. You can order it put together. You can order it just painted and not put together. You can have it not painted and not put together, and that's what this $149 is. If you can pick up a hammer and a paintbrush, save yourself $50. You just put a couple nails in each corner and each side, get a typical outdoor white paint. It doesn't have to be white, but I've seen people that have painted them, the color scheme matches their house, the same trim and shutters, and painted pictures of flowers on it, and do whatever you want. But if you can pick up a paintbrush, you'll have a hive ready to go in an hour. So you get a bottle with this kit, and they sell all different kinds of kits. You can buy a kit for $350. You can buy a kit for $80, but you're only going to get like 1 box. So they come in all different varieties. But the bottom board, the entrance reducer, 2 deep boxes and 1 medium box with all the frames for all 3 boxes, inner and outer cover. Not a bad price. For a tool kit, this is 19 pieces. You don't need all the items that are in this kit. I just found this quickly the other day and put it up there. But here's what you do need. You need some sort of jacket and veil, your smoker, your gloves, your brush. This one comes with 2 hive tools with both styles, and that's a frame hanger. Oh, I was going to show you my frame hanger. Very simple. So if you take a frame out of here, instead of putting it on the ground, you just put this frame hanger on the side of your box, and you hang your frames there while you do your work. This will hold about 3 frames, and that's more than enough for you to move other frames around and do your work. Frame hanger. I don't know what some of those tools are. This is smoker fuel. Again, you don't need to buy that. I don't know what these things are down here. These have to do with extracting honey. This is a little grip thing that you just, it's like claws. You can grab your frame and pick it up. I don't have one. I use my hands. But not a bad price either. So if all you need is the jacket of some sort, smoker, gloves, brush, and a hive tool to do your work, you can do a lot better than $72. Just an example of what you could pay. So let's talk about what the bees look like inside the hive. You get the queen, you get the drones, and you've got the workers. If you look at the size proportion, the queen is the longest of the bees, the drone is the fattest of the bees, and you can tell the drone from the queen and the worker bees, mostly because not only its bulky size, but big beady eyes, big eyes, compared to these little eyes on the queen and the worker. And the worker's a little bit smaller than the drone, but certainly skinnier. So this is a queen here. This has got a yellow dot on her back, and somebody marked her on purpose. That mark serves 2 purposes. You can have a queen that's marked, or you can buy one that's not marked. They usually charge like $5 to mark it. But they mark her because that tells you how old she is. There's an international color scheme. So, and they use it every 5 years because that's how long a queen will usually live. And so this one's got a yellow dot on her back. So that tells me that queen was born either in 2022 or, because we're not at 2027 yet, every 5 years, she was born in 2017. My new hive that I showed you in the picture, I got those bees this year, and she had a green dot on her back. Green says the year that ends in 4, so 2024, and they'll use that color green again in 2029. It also also helps to identify her. I talked about starting a beehive with 10,000 bees. In my tall hive right here, there's probably 60 to 70,000 bees in that hive right now. And if I wanted to find a queen for any particular purpose, it's like, where's Waldo? I've got to look at, because I have this on top of the top big box, she's not going to walk into the honey box. So I have to go take the honey box off, take this queen excluder off, start looking at the 10 frames that are in that top box. And it's a lot easier to see her if she's got a green dot and no other bee's got a green dot. When she's mated, when she mates, she'll fly. A virgin queen will come out of the hive, she'll fly around the hive, some boys will go up and mate with her. When she comes back to the hive, she's going to live 5 years. And during the summer, she's laying up to 2,000 eggs a day. Very, very fertile. She doesn't lay eggs in the wintertime, but when late winter comes, early spring, she's going to start laying again. And in her peaks, she's doing a whole bunch of eggs during the good weather. I talked about normally the bees only have one queen in the hive. If they decide to leave, they'll make a second one, and so the old queen leaves and the new queen stays behind. One queen in the hive. But she does have a stinger. She doesn't come up and sting you if you're messing with the hive. That's what the job of the other bees is for. But if that old queen doesn't leave the hive, they fight. They say, hey, there's only supposed to be one of us here. They'll fight and they'll use their stingers only to kill the other queen. And so whoever wins, whether it's the old queen or the new queen, stays in the hive as the only queen. The drone. So there's the drone, the fat drone. Those are the boys. Again, the big eyes. There's a worker bee, and there's the long, long queen. They don't have a stinger. And I didn't think about this till recently. This surprises me as far as Mother Nature. I'm not a sexist, but you don't get little people to play football. You get big people to play football to do the job. You know what I mean? So if you have to protect your hive, don't you want the big guys to protect the hive versus the little guys? So why did nature give the boys a stinger? I don't know. Nature just didn't do it. So they don't have a stinger, so they can't defend the hive. They do a couple things, but that's another class. But in the hive, I just said they just wait to mate with the queen. But other than that, they just hang out. There's only several hundred in a hive. Most of the bees in the hive are females, with just several hundred males. Some 60, 70,000 bees, there won't be 1,000 males. There'll be several hundred. So, the girls will feed them. The girls will clean them. They're nice, because they want to take care of them in case they do need them for mating with the queen. But, when wintertime comes, here's where the girls become brutal. Very mean girls. They say to them, hey, boys, we kept you around here just in case you had to mate with the queen. There's not going to be any mating going on in December or January outside this hive, okay? Let's get that straight. So you're not going to sit around here and do no work and eat all the honey that we collected. We're not going to feed you, we're not going to clean you, so goodbye. So when winter time comes, the girls will chase the males out of the hive. If the boys come back into the hive, the girls say, hey, we kicked you out. The boys say, hey, I want to stay there, sorry. They'll chew their wings off and push them out of the hive, and now the guy falls down on the ground, he can't get any food, so he dies. If they can't chase them out of the hive, they'll chase them around inside the hive and trap them in a corner, and then the girls will gang up on them and generate enough heat, and they'll kill the males by generating a whole bunch of heat on them. See, the girls are very, very mean. But again, nature knows that, hey, so in the wintertime, there's only girls in the hive. But Mother Nature knows, and the queen knows that, hey, here comes springtime, we may need some boys again. So she'll start laying some boy eggs, and those boy eggs will hatch, and the cycle just repeats itself.
Can she choose, like, what type of egg?
I'm sorry?
Can she choose what type of egg she uses?
She can choose what to do. I'll talk about it. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I saw that look on your face. Yeah. So the worker, they're the girls. So 99% of the bees in the hive are girl, they do all the work. So it doesn't matter if you're the boy, the drone, the worker, the girl, or the queen, they all go through these 4 stages when the egg is laid. If it's a boy egg, girl egg, or queen egg, the first day it's laid, it's laying down, the very next day it stands up, smaller than a grain of rice. It grows into a larva. When it's almost fully developed, the bees will cap it, and then they have to chew their way out of the capping. So here's some eggs, and you can see that's why I use the black background for my brood boxes, because it's a lot easier to see a little white egg against a black background than it is against a white background. That's not the queen there. I don't know why she has her butt down in there, but those are what eggs look like when they're a day or 2 old. Here's what they look like when they're larvae. You can see a couple of bees diving into the cells. They're feeding the bees. We'll talk about feeding the bees. When it's almost fully developed, again, they'll cap it, and this is what it, and then it fully develops inside the capping. And that's what each of the cells look like. These flat ones are the worker cells. That's the girls. They're the shortest ones. So that capping is flat. The boys, because he's a little bit longer and fatter, there's not enough room for a flat cell. So the bees will build this little bullet dome to give that longer bee a little bit more room to grow. And the queen is the longest of the 3, so she needs a long cell. But because she is the longest, look how close these frames are together when they're in the box. There's not enough room for that long queen cell to go sideways, because there's only a little bit of room there. So they'll make a cell that hangs to give it enough room to grow. So I might as well answer your question now. When the queen comes back, she'll mate with several males. When she comes back to the hive and she starts laying eggs, if she sees this type of cell starting to be built, she knows that's a boy's cell. So when she squirts an egg out of her ovary, she won't mix it with any boy semen. And so when it comes out, it's an unfertilized egg, and that will turn into a boy. And she makes that decision not to squirt out of her gland the fluid that needs to impregnate that egg. So when she sees another cell that's nice and clean and flat, when she squirts the egg out, she'll mix it with the seminal fluid, and that becomes a normal egg, and it will be a girl. A fertilized egg will turn into a girl. And I'll continue that conversation with the queen. If your queen dies, or if they fight and both queens die, they stay each other, you can let the bees make their own queen. Or you can buy another queen and go through the process again. But if the bees make a queen on their own, what they do is they'll take a girl egg out of one of the cells that we saw, a little white thing there, and they'll put it in that queen cell. That's a girl egg. They'll feed all of the boy cells, the girl cells, a balanced diet. Water, pollen, nectar, royal jelly. But if they need to make a new queen, when they put a girl egg, and they have to do it quickly, it's going to be a brand new girl egg, in that cell, all they will do is feed that egg as royal jelly. That's it. The mere fact that they feed that egg royal jelly turns that girl, that normal girl, into a queen. Nature. Amazing. So this is 8 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a girl, because it's a flat cell, chewing her way out, and it just progresses more. Got the head out now, 2 front legs, a little bit of the shoulders, half the body, and eventually, so it doesn't matter. A boy's going to do the same thing, a queen's going to do the same thing. Chew their way out and crawl out as a brand new bee. So look how long it takes a bee to hatch once an egg is laid. The worker, because she's the smallest bee, will hatch in 21 days. The boy Because he's longer and fatter, it takes him a few more days to get out of there, because he's had time to develop. The queen is surprising with the amount of time, 16 days. She's the longest bee of the bunch. So she should take like 24, 25, 26 days. But nature's in play again. Nature says, hey, the success of the hive is based on the queen. This hive will fail if you have no queen. This hive will flourish if you have a good queen. So nature says, queen, you got to get out of there as soon as possible to do your job and make sure this hive is successful. So she hatches quicker because of nature's rules. Let's talk about the work that the bees do inside the hive. From the very first day the bee is born, she's walking around cleaning. The queen, when she walks around, will not lay an egg in a dirty cell. If there's a piece of wax left over from when the last bee chewed her way out, the queen won't lay an egg there. If there was a piece of grass stuck to a bee's leg and dropped it in the cell by mistake, she won't lay an egg in it. So the young bees walk around and clean the cells so the queen can lay eggs. Till they're about a week or more old, they're nurse bees. They will go around and feed the bees that balanced diet. When they're on the tail end of that first 11 days, they're called nurse bees. When it's in the pupa stage, when it's semi-developed, before they cap it, they'll feed it one last time, and so then they'll cap it. Those are the nurse bees that feed it one last time. 2 weeks old, a little bit more, they can make wax out of glands in their body. They don't build anything, they just make it. So they make it, and they pass it off to the older bees, and let the older bees do the building. Honey sealing. That wax is a little bit lighter than the wax of cells for the brood. So they can make that kind of wax sealing. Then they'll walk around and feed the boys. And they say, enjoy it now, boys. You don't know what's coming later. Queen attendants. No matter, remember, I've got 2 boxes here. That queen can go wherever she wants in those 2 boxes, 20 frames. But wherever she goes and pauses, there'll be girls around her to take care of her. They're a little bit older now. Now they can actually start building the honeycomb. They can take that blank frame that I have in the box and build that honeycomb. The younger bees can't build it, so they'll take that wax and give it to the older bees. The older bees will build the honeycomb. Pollen packing. This bee is going to bring pollen in from the field, and this frame, I pointed out that this darker area is where the queen had laid her eggs, and the lighter area is where the bees will pack some pollen and some honey. So that's what they're doing when they're a little bit older. They make that propolis substance I talked about. And unfortunately, bees die. If I've got 3 boxes up here, and the bees are doing work and they get tired because they're old and they die, they're going to fall down to the bottom of the box on that bottom board, and so there will be some bees that will take those dead bees out and drop them on the ground. A couple of weeks ago, I went out to my hive, and on the grass in front of my hive, I picked up some dead bees. I've got 5 dead bees in here, 4 girls and a boy. Tell me if you can tell the difference between 4 girls and 1 boy in there.
Yes.
It's just a fact of life. They die, and they take them out, they drop them on the ground. So I just picked up. Smell good?
Smells strange.
Yeah, they're dead bees. Fanning bees. There's a lot of fanning going on inside the hive. 2 of them are completely opposite. If it's too hot in the hive, they'll do some fanning to circulate the air to try to cool the hive down. If it's too cold in the hive, they'll turn their bodies a different way and beat their wings stronger and harder to generate some heat to keep the hive warm. In the wintertime, that hive will be somewhere between 60 and 65 degrees. They'll generate enough heat to keep that hive warm and stay alive. When the queen is laying eggs, in order to go through from that egg to the larva of the pupa, that hive has to be at least 92 degrees. They'll regulate the temperature of the hive to make sure that hive is at least 92 degrees so the bees can grow properly. Also, there's another fanning I'll talk about in a second, but when they're older, almost 3 weeks old, there's 4 levels of guard bees on this hive. 4 levels. Guard bees, soldier bees, entrance guard bees, and outside guard bees. Now, The analogy I use is like the Navy with an aircraft carrier. A Navy that's out on maneuvers with an aircraft carrier doesn't keep all its planes on the ship at the same time. Because if there's a threat 100 miles away, they don't have time to get the planes up and crank them up and start and get the crew out there and then take off. That's time lost. So to protect the aircraft carrier at all times, they always have planes in the air that can react in cases of emergency. The bees do the same thing. They've got bees flying around the outside of the hive smelling for threats. Does a dog have a good sense of smell? Does a dog have a good sense of smell? Yeah. Explosives, drugs, tracking people, dead body, all kinds of dogs that smell stuff. Now they get dogs that smell people with medical problems.
Right.
So a honeybee has got a sense of smell 50 times greater than a dog. So they're out there smelling for strange bees or bears, whatever they're. Then you've got bees that just walk back and forth in front of the hive, and when another bee lands there and says, hey, I want to come in, they'll go up and smell that bee. If it smells the same pheromone, all right, you can go in. If it smells a different pheromone, hey, you don't belong here, get out of here, get out of here. And if the bee, or whatever, wasp point, yellow jack, whatever it is, tries to get in, they'll fight. And if there's not enough bees walking in the front, then they'll call for the 2 levels of bees on the inside to come out and help them. So 4 levels of defense for the hive. Water carriers. There's bees that will go out there and get water and bring it back to the hive, and they'll put it on the back of other bees, and other bees will fan it, air conditioning. 3 weeks old to about 5 weeks old. They go out and do the foraging. Honeybee will walk to 2 miles away to find what they need. Water, pollen, nectar. If it's right outside the hive, 100 yards away, they don't have to fly too far. But if there's nothing close, they'll fly up to 2 miles away. One of the questions people ask me all the time, oh, I wish I could be a beekeeper, but I don't have enough room. You don't need a whole bunch of room. We have a woman that belongs, and I'm going to talk about Worcester County beekeepers at the end there. She lives in Worcester on a 3-family house. She has 2 beehives on her 2nd floor back porch. The bees come off her porch, they fly and get some water and pollen and nectar, they come back to her porch. You don't need a farm. You just need a spot to put the hive. They bring pollen back, they bring water back, they bring nectar back. And unfortunately, in the summertime, that's why it's 35 days. They only live to be about 5 weeks old in the summertime. Because if they don't have too far to go, 100 yards, they're only doing a little bit of work, so to speak. But if there's nothing close by and it's 2 miles away, 2 miles away, 2 miles away, as soon as the sun comes up, they're doing their chores. As soon as the sun comes down, they're inside the hive. But they work all day. And because they work all day, they usually live only to be about 5 weeks old in the summertime. But that varies based on how much work they do. But then wintertime comes, if the queen is laying eggs in like September or October, those bees will live to be about 4 or 5 months old. Because they're in the hive most of the time and they're not doing a whole bunch of work flying around. So, but that's average lifespan for a bee in the summertime is 5 weeks. The bees have enemies. Carnivores like bears. I've got a friend that lives in Princeton, and she's got a bear that's coming through her yard, but fortunately hasn't, I'll use the word attack, destroyed her hive yet. Skunks like beehives. They can't tear it apart, but they can sit close by and eat some bees like peanuts, you know. We know birds eat all sorts of insects. Other wasps, hornets, yellow jackets, those kind of things will try to get in and steal their honey. And I always use the term humans. We're a threat to bees in a certain respect. Is if you look around you, what used to be a farm is now condos. What used to be a field of flowers is now use storage location. We're taking away their natural habitat where there would be flowers and weeds growing where they can collect nectar and pollen, not as much as they used to be. So we are an enemy to the bees in that respect, but we're also helpful to the bees at the same time. Parasites on this girl bee are 2 mites, varroa mites. So yesterday I went into my hive, when I went into my hives, I treated my 2 hives for mites. Mites to a bee are like ticks to a dog. They latch onto the bee and they suck on them. And they don't kill the bees by that, but they make them weaker. And now they're more susceptible to other problems. And this is only 2. I've seen bees with 6 and 8 mites on them. Shame. So, but we can treat for mites in several different ways. So we kill the mite population to keep the bee hive healthy. So if we do a good job, like I said yesterday, I went into my hive to treat my bees, and while I was there, I took out 10 frames out of my honey super, and I put 10 empty frames in there. This one's got a little bit of empty space on one side. I'm going to pass this around. But of all the frames, they were completely filled on both sides, just like that. Look at the sides and tops of the wood prolips. This tells me that there was another box on top of this box, and they sealed the 2 boxes together. And the same thing with the side. Look at the 2 frames were sitting side by side. They sealed the 2 frames side by side. This is what we want to take out of the honey super. Frames that are completely capped, or almost completely capped, with honey. And the way we extract it, again, I told you, if it was only 1 or 2 frames, I'd take 1 or 2 frames out, put a couple 10 frames in there. And what we do, if you take a look, before you pass that too much further, look at the wax cells. The wax cells on that stick out just a little bit further than the wood. If you turn it on the side a little bit, you can see the wax stands out a little bit further than the wood. And this, what you do is you take an extracting knife, you lay it on the wood, and just slide your knife down the wood, and it will cut out all the caps. This looks like a butcher knife to me. This looks like a kitchen butcher knife, not the extracting knife I showed you earlier. It doesn't matter. They make electric ones. And you do that to both sides of the frame. This is an extractor. It's a manual one. It only holds 4 frames. That's all I need for a hobbyist with 2 hives. But once you shave off the caps off both sides, you put it in the basket, and this is like a washing machine. It's got to be balanced. So you got to put either 1 on each side or 2 on each side. This model holds 4 frames to keep it balanced. You take that handle and you crank it for about 30-45 seconds, and then you stop. The handle won't keep flipping around. The baskets will keep on spinning, and when they're spinning really, really fast, it whips the honey out of the frame and hits the side of the barrel and falls down to the bottom. When those baskets stop spinning, you take the frame out, turn it around, put it back in there. Now you're going to spin the honey out of the other side of the frame. Crank it for about 30-45 seconds. And when it stops, you open up the valve that's at the bottom of your extractor, and here comes all your honey. But look what's coming with it. See all these specks? That's pieces of wax. Because when you shave those caps off the frame, you're breaking pieces of wax. So when you spin it out, those pieces of wax are going to fly off and into the honey and come out with it. So you open up the valve and you put it over a strainer that's in a 5-gallon bucket. And so that strainer will catch all those pieces of wax. So when this is completely capped on both sides, this weighs close to 5 pounds. Anybody look at things?
Yes.
I mean, you could eat it right now, but do you want all that wax in your mouth at the same time? So at the bottom of that 5-gallon bucket, you got another valve, you open that up, and you put your honey into the jars, and you're done.
So you don't have to treat the honey, you can just, that's it, you just strain it.
You strain it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's not like maple syrup where you got to boil it down, or you don't add anything to it, nothing's going to be, it is what it is.
That's amazing.
How do you clean out your final barrel?
So, now, I've extracted the honey out of my frame. So now I get this gooey frame. I got pieces of wax and a lot of honey still stuck to it. You take this, if this is my hive, you take your gooey frames and you put it about 50 feet away. The bees will find that, and bring that honey back to your hive. So think about it. The bees go out and get nectar, bring it back into the hive, put it in the cells and fan it, and they fan it till it's the right water content, and then it turns into honey and they cap it. That's work for them. So if they can find honey over there and bring it back to the hive, you just save them a whole bunch of work. They'll make this frame bone dry in 2 days. So when I go back out in a couple days, I'll take a whole frame out, put this one in there. They'll patch it up, all the work I did by cutting. They'll repair it, and they'll fill it. The wax cappings, I do the same thing. We shave those wax cappings off. I take those cappings off, and I put it on a cookie sheet. I put it over there. There's going to be other insects too. There's ants and there's bumblebees, hornets, wasps. They're all trying to get the free honey. But they'll make those wax cappings bone dry. I'll take those wax cappings back to the house. I make hand cream out of it. I make lip balm. I make candles and stuff like that with the wax that they cleaned up for me. 3 jars of honey. It all came from my hive. So you can see the difference in colors. And the same thing is true for taste. The color and the taste of the honey is based on where they get their nectar. In central Massachusetts, and I would say for the most part all of Massachusetts, and including a lot of New England, the flowers and the weeds that come up in late March, early April, crocuses, daffodils, forsythia, those kind of early risers, by nature make a very light color nectar. So when the bees go out and get the nectar from those plants or bring it back to the hive and fan it and turn it into a honey, it becomes light color honey. Those plants die, the plants that come up May and June and July make a darker nectar in those flowers, so the bees bring it back and that becomes darker honey. Same thing for the fall. Those fall flowers make it darker. Just the way New England is. They don't do anything to it, which is where they collect their nectar. The same thing is true for taste. I just label my honey as wildflower honey because I have no idea where they go. But if you've got 100 acres of clover and you have hives in that clover field, you can call it clover honey, and it has a distinct taste to it. Same thing for apple orchards and orange groves, cranberry, blueberry. I tasted all of those. They're yummy. You can taste the orange, the citrus. You can taste the apple. Apple orchard honey is delicious, almost like apple pie. So the color and taste is just based on where they get their nectar. On the table before you leave, I've got several handouts that you can take them with you when you go. But this one is on there. You could put honey on a mosquito bite because it has anti-inflammatory properties. But you have to think about this. Don't sit on your back porch with honey on your arm because you'll probably attract a couple other insects. My mom used to give me, honey when I was a kid to ease my sore throat. I have people that buy my honey to help them build up their resistance to certain allergies. All I use my own honey for is to put it in tea, hot tea. And as far as taste is concerned, with these 3 jars of honey, if I put a teaspoon of this light color honey in my tea, and then a couple days later put a teaspoon of the dark honey in my hot tea, I probably wouldn't tell the difference. Because I'm just going to have a hot, sweet tea. But if we were to take a taste of the light one, then cleanse your palate, and then take a taste of the dark one, you can tell the difference. I use the term richer, not sweeter. But I have people that buy my honey because they have allergies. And so I used to just sell them my honey. So then after a few years, I learned. I said, you have allergies. Well, what are you allergic to? Which flowers are you allergic to? Are you allergic to spring flowers or fall flowers? So if you're allergic to spring flowers, you need to take the light honey because that comes from the same plants that you're allergic to, a teaspoon a day. If you're allergic to fall flowers, you take the dark honey because that's where the allergies are coming from, those dark plants. So it doesn't do any good to take the light color honey in the fall because you're not allergic to those flowers. Wounds and burns, I'll jump ahead. I belong to Worcester County Beekeepers Association. We meet all year. The last indoor meeting we had, we're meeting outdoors now. We had 2 doctors come up from Rhode Island. They were here 5 years ago. They came up again this past couple months. that meeting, they spoke for 2 hours about treating wounds and burns with honey. We made a jar, small jar, of ointment. 50-50 mix of aquaphor. You know what aquaphor is? You can buy it at CVS. It's kind of like petroleum jelly if you don't know what aquaphor is. 50-50 mix of aquaphor and honey. Mix it up. They said throw away your Neosporin and diacetyl. This is from 5 years ago, but I still use it to teach class. But I have a brand new jar in my medicine cabinet. It's just a soft ointment. They said put this on your wounds, on your burns. You'll heal faster and you'll have less scarring. I mean, that's the bottom line. But again, they spoke for 2 hours. And they were talking up here with certain scientific terms, and they were talking down here that we could all understand. I can understand heal faster and less scarring. And they're very well known in the medical field as far as honeybees and wound care. They've got published papers, so they're very well respected in their field. I couldn't wait to cut myself twice. Also, and put Neosporin on one arm and put the ointment on. But they said, if you get a nice cut or a nice burn, put that on there, put your bandage on, change it 2 or 3 times, not 2 or 3, but 2 or 3 days later, and you will heal faster and you will have less scarring. So, the bees do a lot of work, flying back and forth, bringing nectar back to the hive in order to make honey. 1 jar of honey, 16 ounces, 1 pound. I question the miles because, again, if you've got a couple hundred acres of flowers and clover and daffodils and anything else like that, they don't have to fly far, so it's not going to be that many miles. But if they have to go a long distance to get what they need, those miles will add up. But that's how much work. The average worker bee, when she starts flying out and collecting nectar and bringing it back to the hive, in her life, and she only does 5 weeks in the summer, and she's not out those whole 5 weeks. She's doing some work in the hive when she's young. She's only outside the hive for a couple of weeks. In her lifetime, she only makes 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. 1/12 of a teaspoon. So you need to see how many bees you need to take all those 1/12 of teaspoons to make a jar of honey. Einstein said this about 80 years ago. I'd have to look up the exact year, but it wasn't 100 years. But that was probably true in his lifetime. We were very indifferent to honeybees 100 years ago. Agriculture practices and so forth and so on. Herbicides, pesticides, stuff like that. So that could have been true at one point in time, but it's not true anymore, because we've come a long way. This is not all the fruits and vegetables that the honeybees pollinate, but just to let you know, this is just some of them. And they pollinate about 1/3 of the fruits and vegetables we eat every day. They're on the other side, fruits and vegetables. But they also pollinate field crops, what the animals will eat. We eat some of these, sugar beets and peanuts and stuff like that. But a lot of field animals, cows, sheep, pigs, eat these. And so you can see if the honeybees disappear, it's not going to only affect us from not having these to eat because they pollinate these, but they're not pollinating these as well. And to give you a good example of how important honeybees were, I became a beekeeper. I've been 16 years now. In my first year of beekeeping, I read an article that was about 2 years old about China and the problem they were having in China with their honeybee population. It was so bad in China for their crops that they actually had people on step ladders with little brushes going from one flower to the next flower to the next flower, pollinating by hand. Well, when you got 4 billion people, you can do that, but we couldn't do that in the United States. They found out what their problems were that were affecting the honeybees and fixed the problems, and now they don't do that anymore. So what can you do to help? The first year I moved into my house, I planted a garden, good-sized garden, 20 by 40 feet for my little city lot. That first year I had the lousiest garden. The next year I became a beekeeper. I had my bees. That year my garden was excellent. I'd be out there in my garden weeding and doing all sorts of things. I could see the bees in the garden going from flower to flower. They were doing their job. There must not have been any other bees around me. that first year. When I had my house, I used to kill bugs that I didn't like. I didn't realize at the time that the bugs I didn't like were dying, so weren't the bees. They're just another bug. So I stopped using pesticides. You've seen highways stretches which says do not mow or bother pollinators and stuff like that. Cities are coming a long way to help those honeybees in certain respects. My house, I wanted to keep up with the Joneses and have my pretty golf course lawn like they did. So I would put the Scotch fertilizer and weed killer down in my yard 4 times a year. When I became a beekeeper, I stopped because I know how important the clover and the dandelions were to young bees. So I would let my dandelions grow pretty tall. And I would let clover grow in my yard. I didn't care. It was food for the bees. Raise awareness. I go to schools, I go to libraries. I raise awareness by giving talks like this. And if you want to help, become a beekeeper. If you're interested in becoming a beekeeper, I'm going to put up another slide that's got the website of the Worcester County Beekeepers Association. The Worcester County Beekeepers Association is the oldest county beekeepers association in the United States. It is also the largest county beekeepers association in the United States. We don't have a building, it's just a collection of people who love beekeeping. And it's not just Worcester County people. We have people from New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I know those are short, and I'm probably sure that there's people from other places as well. Just to show you that, we had a seminar back in March with 400 and some odd people in it. So here's where numbers come back into play. I told you at Clemson there were 50 people. They have their own bee school. The first year I went to the Worcester County, first year I did beekeeping on my own. Google this, Google that, Google that. I didn't know anything about beekeeping, so I found out by looking. Then I found out that there's an organization called Worcester County Beekeepers Association. I became a member. I signed up for bee school. I went to their bee school. They used to have the bee school at the UMass Memorial Hospital in Worcester. I went into the first year of beekeeping, the bee school. There were 350 people in bee school. I was impressed with 50 people. Here's 350. The next year there were over 400 people in bee school. For some reason, I don't know the exact details, but we moved from Worcester to Grafton High School. We were doing bee school at Grafton High School, and then COVID came along. And then now we're doing it all by Zoom. So Worcester County Beekeepers has their own bee school. First week in March, 8 weeks. Thursday night, 7 to 9. I teach a class the first night on the hive and your equipment. Not everything I talk about tonight. It's a very simple 45-minute class on a hive and equipment. At that seminar, we had 400 and some odd people at that seminar in March. They came from New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I don't think they came from Maine. We had 2 people zoom in from France. It sounds funny, but people know Worcester County beekeepers in the beekeeping world. There are other beekeeping organizations in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island, but they drive up to come to our meetings because they know how we get to talk great speakers. At that seminar, we had the 2 top bee experts in the United States come to Worcester to talk about beekeeping. So people know that if the 2 top beekeepers are coming to Worcester, I'm coming from Rhode Island to hear these people talk. Once you're a member, you can see what the schedule is for where we're meeting. In the cold weather months, we meet indoors. That when I talked about the 2 doctors was our last indoor meeting. Last month was our first outdoor meeting. What we do is we go to somebody's house that's got 20 beehives. That first outdoor meeting, there were 180 people there. They have an introduction. Hey, here's what we're going to talk about today, blah, 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 blah. All right, you 10 go to this beehive. There's an experienced beekeeper there waiting for you. So when those 10 people show up here, somebody like me is going to say, hey, welcome. Here's what you should do with your hive in May, as an example. Do this, do that, do this, do that. You understand? Good. Now, you go back to your own hive and you know what to do because you saw somebody do it in a class at somebody else's house. So I'm going to do a couple things here. In January, sign up for bee school. February, buy your equipment. February, March, order your bees. Find a mentor on the website. There's a link there for mentors. You click on that if you live in Lunenburg as an example. They have a list of mentors by city. I don't know about Lunenburg specifically, but if there's 3 people in Lunenburg who will volunteer to be a mentor to new beekeepers, you may contact with them. They do it free of charge, there's no cost. You say, hey, will you be my mentor? And they say, yeah. They come to your house at your hive, and you know what we did in the hives at the meeting in May? All right, let's do that at your hive in May. We just had the June meeting a couple days ago, Saturday. Where was that? Berlin. I went to the meeting in Berlin, I forgot where it was. Again, I didn't count them all, but more than 100 people. Here's what you do in June at a hive. In addition to that, they had the class, the different stations. In addition to going to the hive and learning what to do with a hive in June, so when you go back to your hive and make a mentor, when you do how to make mead out of honey, how to make hand cream, and there was a third one, I forget what the third one was. So they rotated stations and you learned about how to make mead, how to make hand cream, in addition to what you have in June. And in July, August, September, October. If somebody's house different every time, what do you do July? What do you do in August? What do you do in September? When the cold weather comes, we meet at the Knights of Columbus in Leicester. And we have guest speakers. We have a potluck supper on Friday night. And we have guest speakers, and I told you about the 2 guest speakers that came and talked about wound care. And then when March comes along, go to bee. You can juggle these a little bit. You can register for bee school. You can buy your equipment for us. There's no set order, but these things you need to be doing because most bee deliveries, 2 in April and 1 in May. And when you order your bees, you normally pick when you want your bees delivered. So you can order your bees in February, and you can buy your equipment in March. It doesn't make any difference, but as long as you have both ordered and ready to go when you get your bees in April or May. Okay, May you start. Yeah, oh, that's not right. April, we were meeting. No, May was our first October. Got it?
I have to save this so I can research it. I'm really interested.
I have my paper business cards over there. If you're thinking about becoming a beekeeper, or if you want to know something about beekeeping, or if you have a bee problem, they don't know if they're yellow jackets or honeybees, if you have a general question, give me a holler, and I will point you in the right direction. Is that it? There's the website for Worcester County beekeepers. If you're thinking about beekeeping, I strongly advise you to join. It's like $15 to become a member. That guy that got me hooked on beekeeping about 8 years ago, I looked him up. He has his own bee school I told you about. At the time, it was $285. If you sign up for bee school, last year it was $49. When you get your bee school for $49, they also give you the membership in the WCBA at the same time. You can't beat world-class instruction for $49, not even $49, so if you take $15 off of the membership, then you would get by joining the Worcester County Beekeepers Association. Got about 2,000 members. They're all over the place. What are your questions? Did I answer everything as we went along?
Go ahead. Winter. How far down do you knock down your hives?
I think winter. And that was one of the first questions I asked. I said, what do I do in the winter time? And usually, for the most part, in central Massachusetts, you don't have to do anything special to your hive. But, so they will generate enough heat in the hive to keep it warm. Sometimes the bees are down low in the first box, sometimes they're in the second box. You take your honey supers off, and they're either in 1 box or 2 boxes. I went to Afghanistan in 2014 and 2015. I left. I still blame my wife. My bees died in 2000, the winter of 2014, 2015. I'm in Afghanistan, all right? So she sent me emails. I get it a couple days later. A couple days later, I reply, yeah, I understand the situation. She goes, I think your bees are dead. And I said, no, just go out to the hive and give it a little jiggle. That'll a little bit, and they'll start buzzing. And she did that a couple days later. I don't hear any buzzing. I said, give it a little bit of a hard shake. again, time goes by, give it a good, so she went out there, no buzzing. She goes, John, I think they're dead. So she contacted somebody came out, kind of went through the same thing, but opened up the hive, all the bees are dead. I don't know the reason because I wasn't there, but I still blame my wife.
So I've been doing it for 5 years now, I haven't been able to get it the whole winter yet.
So what do I do the next year? As far as treating them for mice or whatever, I couldn't do that. But the next year, I went out and bought insulin, in case it was the cold that killed them. That was the winter, if you can recollect, we had like 100 inches of snow that winter. She sent me pictures where my son is snowboarding, and the snow piles are like this. And so in case it was the cold that killed them, I went out the next year and bought insulation. But the two major causes of, they said in central Massachusetts you don't usually have to insulate your hive, but I wasn't taking any chances. If you're up in northern Vermont and Hampshire, maybe you'd have to insulate your hive. But if you've treated them and you've observed for any other problems besides mites or certain diseases, you can treat them with antibiotics, but you have to know what you're doing. If they're healthy going into the winter and they've got enough food, and I'll tell you a food story. I was at the Spencer Fair one year, standing beside an observation hive, and they asked me some questions. Well, I used to be a beekeeper, but the bees kept on dying on me in the wintertime coming. And I said, really? I said, other than treating them for mites, I said, were you feeding them? He goes, you're supposed to feed them? And I said, yeah. So his bees were starving every winter.
The only thing I can account for it the last couple of years is that they got cold, they got wet, they got warm, they got wet, and then they got cold.
Yeah. We've got somebody that not preaches, but advises that take a popsicle stick and put it between your inner cover and your top box and leave the hive cracked out like that. So, because it's going to get warm and cold during the winter time comes, and to get some ventilation out of it so you don't have condensation in the hive that'll get on them and harm them. But other than some other generalities, I don't know why they're behind every winter. And I don't know, the bees themselves will store enough honey to last through the winter, in their minds. But do they know what the winter's going to be like any more than I do? No. If it's a mild winter, they should be okay. But it's just like fuel in your house. When I lived in my house, and before I moved into the condo, in December, January, February, I was putting fuel in my oil tank once a month, sometimes twice a month, based on how bad the winter was. I'm using more fuel. The bees are the same way. They're eating their honey. If it's a mild winter, they're okay. Is it severe winter, they're going to go through that honey and they're going to have no food. And so, because I don't know how bad the winter's going to be, that's why I make the sugar patties and put it up there. So as far as work in December goes, I'll put that sugar patty on top of the hive in November. And then I'll go down there in the middle of the month, in December, and I'll pop up that outer cover and look. If they haven't touched that sugar patty up there, that tells me they're eating their food down below. They don't eat my food. I'll go back there in January. Same thing, I'll pop that hive open. If they haven't touched it, they're still doing well. But if they start to eat into that sugar patty, that tells me they're running out of food down here and they're eating my sugar patty. So I won't wait another month to go out there. I'll go down there in 2 weeks with another sugar patty. And if I pop that hive and I see that sugar patty is almost gone, I'll slide another one in. So that's how much work you do December, January, February. You're 10, 15, 20 seconds worth of work in the wintertime comes. And so this winter I kept my bees 3 times. And the last time, I'm going to get 2 nets after this guy. And the last patty I made, I put some pollen in there because I know the queen is going to start laying her eggs, and that like stimulates that action.
Got a queen that's in a hole like that tree we're looking at. Is it perfectly kosher to order up a queen bee from someplace, put it in a closed box on the outside, and try and lure those loose bees away from that queen that's in the trees, or breaking that hive in half?
I don't. If they're in that tree and they're established, you're not going to trap them. That's their house. Yeah. There's ways to capture them, and there's a few different pieces of it. They actually make a scent, an attractive lure scent to try to get them to do that, but it's got to be the right circumstance. I personally wouldn't do what you're.
Is there anything that attracts queen? Could I get her to come out, or she's just not going to quit working?
She's not.
I think you mentioned insulating the hive in the wintertime. If it's getting really cold, how do you do that?
You can buy insulating kits, or you can make your own. I bought a kit, because once my bees died, I was paranoid, because I didn't know if it was the cold that killed them. But it's like a pullover sweater. It's square, like the dimensions of the box, you just slide it over, you take your outer cover off, because the outer cover is bigger than the box, you take your outer cover off, slide that down, and put your inner cover back on. But you don't want to close up the opening, because we had some nice 60-degree weather this winter. So the bees, even though they're inside trying to keep warm, if it's above 45 degrees, they'll come out of the hive in December and January, fly around and stretch the wings and go poop, because they're holding it inside as long as they can. If you don't insulate, if you got snow around the hive, snow is an insulator. I let that snow stick around the hive. I just make sure I clear the opening to make sure they get some ventilation.
Can a bee freeze and be resuscitated? You know,
Well, I don't know about resuscitating, but in the hive in the wintertime comes, they'll cluster and they'll beat their wings to stay warm. And as long as they're healthy, there's enough bees to do that. But if they're diseased or sick or something like that, and they start to die, 10 are going to die on this side, 10 are going to die on this side. Now you, instead of having 15,000 bees, you got 14,500. Then you got 14,000. You get to, now there's not going to be enough bees in the hive to generate enough heat to, and so they'll start to get cold and freeze, and not freeze inside the hive, but hypothermia and die. Yeah.
You ever hear of anybody putting a heater in the base?
I have. It's been a little while, but I know there are some people that you can buy a heater.
Yeah, I was saying, I have solar
Yeah.
on a building next to us. I have a 12-volt heater I picked up in a thermostat. I was gonna try that this
Yeah.
year.
I haven't seen it, but I have heard people talk about it. They'll have a heater and they'll adjust the temperature on the thermostat for the hive. I just don't do it. I think I do it with that job.
I just wanted to know if I was going off in left field all by myself or somebody else.
No, there are beekeepers that will heat their hives.
does calling have a maximum lifespan, or will it pretty much go perpetual?
If, in a perfect world, it'll just keep on going. You treat them for diseases and you manage the hive, to move the frames around. There's certain things you gotta do that, but there are beekeepers that have had the same hive for like 10 years that I know of.
Do bee mites, the little guys attacking, do those have a predator of some sort? Something, is there anything that likes to eat the mites off of bees?
Not that I'm aware of.
Does treating for the mites affect the honey?
I'm sorry?
Does treating for the mites affect the honey?
It all depends on what you treat with. One of the simplest treatments is powdered sugar. The mites can't latch onto the bees if they're coated with powdered sugar, so they fall down to the bottom of the hive and they can't climb up onto a bee. Most of the time, the mites get onto bees. It's just like human diseases. A bee with a mite will go to a flower, and then a bee without a mite will go to the same flower, and they'll catch the diseases or mites that way, and so that bee will come back to the hive now with mites. But they don't walk around like ticks on the ground and plants, and they do actual crawling. They're so small and dependent on a host.
I know my bees have had enough honey over the winter, because this spring, before I put in the new hive, I harvested 20 pounds of honey.
So I did 50 pounds yesterday.
Yeah. But I mean, that was just what I had left over the winter. I left it as food for them.
Yep, you can use leftover honey for your food.
Yeah.
How do you protect the hive from bigger predators? Like, I live in a pretty rural area.
Bears would be the only thing I'd be worried about.
Yeah.
Like I said, a skunk will go up there, and there may be a couple other small animals, but they're not going to hurt the hive. The bear will tear a hive apart.
And there's nothing you can do to stop it?
Electric fence.
Awesome.
Yeah. And you've got to have the right voltage. You got to have at least, is it 5 or 50,000? There is a big difference, and I don't have one, so I can't remember the number.
I would say 50.
Yeah, because if you have like 10,000 volts as an example,
Yeah.
a male bear with this thick skin and thick hair is just going to go lean against, they're smart, they'll lean against the wires and knock it down, and they'll ruin themselves, or they'll lay down on it, because I've seen videos, and let the mother and the cubs go through it without them touching the wire. So, but if I'm saying 50,000 volts, the bear will know it's there and won't go in.
You had mentioned that you had your hive knocked over. I had mine about 2-3 years ago knocked over. by a tree in a windstorm.
Yeah,
And like I said, all about 60,000 bees were out there flying around, having a hell of a time.
it's.
Yelling at me because I was trying to put the thing down.
They don't know,
Yeah.
you're the nearest person, they're bringing you.
Well, what I ended up doing after that is, I got some very high poundage rope, and I went all the way from the bottom underneath the cinder blocks I have up and around, and I tied it off at the top.
Okay,
So I have like a stack of books, I have it wrapped in the rope.
that'll work.
So far, I haven't had any trouble with anything, but the other night we did have a bear come through the yard. Thankfully, it did not go to the hive.
I got scared a couple weeks ago, because when I get these, where I live in Auburn, we don't have bears. So I say that, I don't have bears where I live in Auburn. On the other side of Auburn, they do, but I don't know. So, this is Tuesday, that's it. So last Monday, isn't there a bear that comes through my neighborhood? And I didn't know at first. So I walked up to my hive, and near my hive, I've got a plastic tote with some extra frames in it, small frames and big frames. And on the tote, I've got 6 red bricks like you build in a building with. The tote was knocked over, the bricks are scattered, a couple of frames are scattered. So where that tote was from here to the back wall. There was a brick all the way over there, and that's where my hive was. So I'm saying, my kids were up here messing with my stuff and threw a brick over there, because, and then the next day, doesn't the neighbor post, we have a Facebook page for our neighborhood, post a picture of bear in her backyard. So now I put 2 and 2 together, that was a bear that knocked that tote over to get my frames, because there was some honey in them, and threw a brick so close to the hive, but didn't go to my hive. But they're not on my property, so I can't build an electric, well, I probably could if I asked, but I feel awkward asking the guy if I can build an electric fence on his yard.
We have solar powered ones.
Yeah, I could, yeah. My first thought was electricity, and they said, no, just get a solar powered one. I said, "Yeah, I could do that, but I still feel awkward asking the guy if I could do it. Can I put an electric fence on my yard? What else?
So what got you into beekeeping, like originally, like what inspired you to get into doing the beekeeping?
When I get, did you miss my, when I went to Clem's and heard this guy speak about beekeeping, I said, we gotta get bees. All the work, one thing I didn't say, I always forget my punchline. I've got a big box with 10 frames in it. I've got a second box with 10 frames in it. When the time comes, I put the queen excluder, I put a 3rd box on there. They took 10 empty frames, built honeycomb on both sides. 10 more frames, honeycomb, both sides, storing the pollen here, laying the girl eggs here, putting the boy eggs here. I was given a talk at Spencer Fair, and another time, and the guy came up and asked me a few questions, and I spoke for about 15, 20 minutes. And I said, well, I think that answers all your questions. And a woman behind me said, very good job, but you forgot one very important fact. It was the president of Worcester County Beekeepers. And I did, she goes, yes, you did. I said, well, he asked this, I said this, and this, and this. She goes, that's right, we keep going. I said, what did I forget? So again, imagine I've got a second box and a 3rd box and covers on there. All that work you described? I said, yeah. She goes, they do all that work in the dark. I have been a beekeeper for about 4 or 5 years. See that little opening? How much light gets up here in this top box? 0. They do all that work, knowing where and what to build and where to store and stuff like that, they do it in the dark. And I said, wow, I never even thought about that. So, by hearing things like that, I was just hooked. I wanted to be a beekeeper. I walked into Crumbs without a care in the world, not even thinking about becoming a beekeeper like some people did, maybe into one. I'm thinking about that. No, I just wanted to hear what he had to say by the time he was done. I was so. Well, thanks for coming. Again, I got brochures over there you can take with you. Again, my business card is there in case you want to ask me any general questions about bees or hornets or bee school, Worcester County Beekeepers. I'll be glad to answer any questions you want.